Thank you, Jack.
You are welcome.
So now we have another way to respond. You can wiggle your wipers. Wiggle your wipers or flash your lights. Oh boy. So one night, 4 college kids stayed out late partying despite having a final exam in the morning, and no one had studied. So the next day they woke up in a panic, but hatched a plan to get out of the exam. So they covered themselves with grease and dirt and then shuffled into the dean's office. And one stepped forward and said, "Dean, oh man, you'll never believe what happened. We were at a wedding last night, and on the way back, the tire just blew. And we had to push that car all the way back to campus, which made us late for the final. We really hope you'll give us another chance to make up the final exam." So the dean had listened to their story without saying a word. And after a pause, he said, "Okay, you can make it up. Come back in 3 days." So they thanked him and accepted the offer. And for the next 3 days, those 4 students crammed hard. They studied as never before, only taking breaks to eat and sleep. Finally, after 3 days, the students were confident that they knew everything, and nothing could surprise them. So they strolled into the dean's office, confident and determined that each one would ace the exam. Well, since there were no proctors to monitor the room, the dean had them lock their phones in his office. And then he placed each student in their own separate classroom, where a pen and the makeup exam awaited them on the table. And everything was fine until they saw the exam, which had only 2 questions. Number 1, worth 1 point, your name. Number 2, worth 99 points. Which tire had the flat? Making assumptions, that's our topic today, as we continue working with the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And I like the promise. There's a promise for us in his subtitle of his book, which is A Practical Guide to Personal Freedom. So who's noticed more personal freedom this week with practicing last week's, which is not taking anything personally? Anybody get to practice that? I see some lights flashing out there. Great. So spiritual freedom, knowing God at depth, living more from our divine spiritual nature, from divine wisdom. Isn't that why we're here? To remember and strengthen that. To remember who we are as beloved creations of a loving Creator. Here to bring more love, more peace, more joy and abundance, and co-create heaven on earth. So as a review, we began with the first agreement, be impeccable with your word, which is all about harnessing the power of our words to create in the direction of truth and love, which includes prayer, affirmations, positive words to self and others, and telling the truth to ourselves. And then last week we had the second agreement, don't take anything personally, which reminds us that each person has their own perspective, and we can avoid needless suffering when we don't take things personally. So practicing this one frees us from the need to push our point of view as the, quote, correct one or only one. And it also helps us to de-escalate conflict and use our words for creative solutions and bridge building. And you see how these agreements tie together because it helps us to stay conscious of the words we're telling ourselves and about others. So today, the third agreement. Don't make assumptions. How many times have we seen that happen? An assumption is made about a person that ends up causing problems, but then the assumption turns out to be false. Or an assumption is made based on what someone heard or someone said. We've all witnessed these situations, or even have been part of it. And truth be told, it's very easy to make assumptions without even realizing it. How many assumptions do you think you make each day? Well, we all do it consciously and unconsciously. For example, when we send an email, we assume that it's been delivered, the other person has read it, and not only that, but interpreted it correctly. When we go grocery shopping, we assume the products we need will be on the shelves, and the checker will be courteous. So there's a lot of daily things we make assumptions about, we take for granted, and can find ourselves, if we're not aware, in upset when things don't live up to our assumptions. So the past year and a half has certainly challenged a lot of our assumptions about life. And maybe we're feeling continue to feel challenged by assumptions as we come out of this time of easing out of COVID restrictions. So I hope you were gentle with yourself, be gentle, understanding with yourself and others, and take care of yourself as we reemerge into, quote, getting back to normal, because it may look different for each person. So trust your own divine wisdom on what is right for you in this time of transition that we're all going through in society. So the biggest assumption that causes trouble is the silent or hidden expectations we have of other people. As Don Miguel Ruiz points out, we make the assumption that everyone sees life the way we do. We assume that others think the way we do, feel the way we do, judge the way we judge. When we don't really know what someone is thinking or why they did what they did, we can tend to make up a reason and then believe it as truth. That's easy to do because in our society, this habit of assumption is kind of promoted by social media and algorithms that feed you more of the same stories. Have you noticed that? And in media outlets owned by the same corporations promoting the same viewpoints can make it seem as if everyone thinks and feels the same way. When in truth, there are many varied perspectives. So why do we make assumptions? Well, often it's easier than finding out the truth, which may take some time and energy. It may feel safer to live in our own fantasy world. It can spare us uncomfortable feelings that knowing the truth may bring. So our minds are brilliant. Our minds like to categorize, justify, and understand in order to feel safe. And this is a big one. Safety is a basic primal need, along with a feeling of belonging. And so we remember we all belong, you belong, we all belong in the family of God, and can find an assurance of safety in God through prayer. And to remember, before even stepping out the front door, to pray up. Just like putting on our shoes, praying, we put on our spiritual shoes. So we're able to step out into the world and see God in every face, and are prepared to silently bless those in our path. I behold the Christ in you. I behold the Christ in you. Let's practice that now. Even if you can't see through someone's windshield, just look around. I behold the Christ in you. I behold the Christ in you. I behold the Christ in you. So notice how that feels to affirm it and to feel that energy of blessing, that spiritual truth coming back, reflected back to you. That's a way we can start our day. So also, we can have the best intentions and go out the front door, and then sometimes we just get triggered. That happens sometimes. And start making negative assumptions, and our namaste becomes namasko. So what are some practical steps that we can take when we catch ourselves making assumptions and going down that bumpy road of mental negativity and separation? Well, the first thing we can do is ask questions. Now, this may be a challenge in itself if you've been taught that it isn't okay to ask questions, especially of an authority figure or someone you're close to. There might have to overcome a fear of looking silly or weak or untrusting. But know that if these fears come up, they are assumptions in themselves, we're assuming how other people will see us. But asking for clarification is one of the most empowering actions that we can take to help us make informed choices. We can ask questions like, can you help me get more clarity? Or, what did you mean by that? What did you mean by that? How do you feel about that? Or can you say more about that? So we can get curious. We can challenge ourselves too, instead of jumping to conclusions, to challenge ourselves by imagining other possibilities. For example, someone cut you off in traffic. Instead of making up a horrible person's story, what could some other possibilities be? Maybe they're late for work, and if they're late one more time, they're going to lose their job. Maybe they're distracted because they've been up all night with a loved one in the hospital. They haven't gotten much sleep. Maybe there's a baby howling in the back seat that needs to get home and changed and fed and held. When we don't know the truth and can't ask questions, why not give someone the benefit of the doubt? Call forth the Christ self and bless them. Have some grace. As one of ministers, Dorothy Pearson, used to say, when I went to her church in Sacramento years ago, she would often say, I'm in the flow of I don't know, but God knows. Another action we can take is to ask for what we really want, to make a direct request, and be willing to hear a yes or a no, but to ask. So practicing this agreement of not making assumptions is so important in relationships, whether it's friends or family, at work, or especially in a partnership situations. Because, making assumptions in our relationships can cause a lot of upset. Often we make the assumptions that our partners know what we think, and we don't have to ask for what we want. But then, what happens? Maybe this dialogue sounds familiar. What's wrong, honey? You have to ask. I'm not a mind reader. And then it can spiral into taking it personally and making up a whole story of you don't know me, you don't love me, and we know where that goes. A whole drama can get created when we make that assumption and heap more assumptions on top of it. Sometimes we don't ask questions because we don't want to know the truth. We want to believe our assumptions. I can recall a time a number of years ago when this happened. I don't know about you, but I've had some embarrassing moments about when I've made assumptions. But in this time, a number of years ago, I was engaged briefly to a man who I thought was the perfect partner, my soulmate, my rainbow's end. At least it appeared that way for a while. And I remember one time we were at a picnic outside. It was a beautiful day. And we were gazing into each other's eyes. And I was basking in the glow of his adoring look. And I had to ask, don't do this, ladies. I had to ask, honey, what are you thinking? And he sighed and replied very lovingly, NASCAR racing. NASCAR racing? What? Ouch. Sometimes we don't want to ask for the truth because it may mean a change. And in that relationship, my lesson was to have the courage to speak my truth and ask for the truth, to have some true communication, and stop living in my fantasy world of what I thought the relationship was, should be, and was going to be. And to his credit, when I asked, he did speak his truth, which was a big reality check, very humbling, and not what I wanted to hear. But it was very revealing because we discovered we wanted some very different things in our future. That he wanted children. And I had already been there and done that. I was already a grandmother. Okay, a very young grandmother. But we both got to make informed choices about the future instead of living the lies of assumptions. As Jesus said in the book of John, chapter 8, if you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So when we hold to the truth of our Christ nature, we are free to co-create our dream of heaven on earth. I knew a couple who wore not one wedding band, but two wedding bands on the same finger. And in their ceremony, the first ring, what it stood for, was pretty amazing. They had one vow that was spoken that they both voiced, which was dedicating their relationship to God. They put God first, and they had the ring to remind them. And then they had the second ring and vow, which symbolized their dedication to each other. So let us remember to invite God into our relationships, into every relationship. And know that whatever the relationship status is, that you are always in relationship with your higher self, with your Christ self. And it is this self we aspire to bring to all of our relationships. So let us now have our time of meditation. And in this meditation is a poem that I invite you to let it be a reaffirmation and a rededication to your Christ self, to your higher self. So I invite you to relax, take a couple of nice deep breaths, and close your eyes if that's comfortable. As we turn inward, Christward, and take some special time to connect with Spirit. I love you. I love not only for what you are, but for what I am when I am with you. I love, not only for what you have made of yourself, but for what you are making of me. I love you for the part of me that you bring out. I love you for putting your hand into my heaped up heart and passing over all the foibles that you can't help but dimly see there. And I love you for drawing out into the light all the beautiful belongings that no one else had looked quite far enough to find. I love you because you are helping me to make of the lumber of my life not a tavern, but a temple. Out of the works of my everyday, not a reproach, but a glorious song. And let us be for a moment now in the silence. And now as we bring our awareness back to this place, let us give thanks for God, for our higher self, and for the love that never ends. Thank you, God. Amen.